If the ports of Shanghai close on Monday morning, Apple is technically bankrupt by Tuesday. Tesla is insolvent by Wednesday, and the entire S&P 500 collapses by the end of the week. We like to think our economy is invincible, like a fortress of steel and concrete. But the truth is, we are standing on a trapdoor made of paper. And that trapdoor is made in China. Today, on FinGraphy, we are not just going to talk about economics. We are going to pull the lever. Imagine for a moment that you wake up on that Monday morning to a silence that feels heavier than usual. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, but something is wrong. You reach for your iPhone on the nightstand, tapping the screen. It is black. It is dead. You press the power button, expecting that familiar Apple logo to glow. Nothing. Just a cold, black piece of glass. You sigh, annoyed. You think to yourself, great, the battery is dead. Or maybe it finally broke. I will just stop by the Apple store on my way to work and pick up a new one. It is an inconvenience, sure, but in your mind, it is a solvable problem. You have a credit card. You have money. Therefore, you can solve problems. Or so you think. You walk into the bathroom to brush your teeth. You squeeze the tube of toothpaste. It is flat, empty. You toss it in the trash and make a mental note, buy toothpaste. Buy phone, simple. Mundane. Just another Monday. But when you step out of your front door, the feeling of unease returns. The streets are quieter. There are fewer delivery trucks. There is a strange tension in the air, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. You arrive at the pharmacy first. You expect the automatic doors to slide open with a welcoming hum. Instead, they stay shut. You step closer. There is a piece of notebook paper taped to the glass. The handwriting is rushed, jagged. It reads simply, closed until further notice. No inventory. You cup your hands against the glass and look inside. The shelves are not just messy, they are barren. The aisle for pain relievers is empty. The vitamin section is stripped bare. The antibiotics, the blood pressure medications, the insulin gone. Dust motes dance in the light where bottles used to be. Panic starts to prick at the back of your neck. A cold drop of sweat slides down your spine. You get back in your car and drive to the electronics store. The parking lot is chaos. People are shouting. Horns are blaring. You manage to squeeze inside the store and you see the Apple display tables. They are empty. No iPhones, no iPads, no MacBooks, just the wooden tables and the terrified look on the employees' faces. You grab a manager by the arm. What is happening? You ask, your voice rising. He looks at you with wide, hollow eyes and whispers, the ships did not come. None of them. We have nothing. It is all gone. This is not a scene from a zombie apocalypse movie. This is not science fiction. This is the first 6 hours of a world where China has suddenly vanished from the global supply chain. We often joke about everything being made in China, treating it like a punchline about cheap quality. But we rarely stop to consider the terrifying reality of what that label actually means for our survival. This is not just about cheap plastic toys or fast fashion. This is about the structural integrity of modern civilization. Today, we are going to run a financial and economic simulation of the unthinkable. We are going to erase the world's factory from the map and watch, hour by hour, as the global economy unravels, stock markets disintegrate, and hyperinflation turns a simple tube of toothpaste into a luxury asset worth more than gold. We are talking about a supply chain shock so massive it makes the crisis of 2020 look like a minor inconvenience. We are talking about the total collapse of companies like Apple and Tesla. We are talking about a world where the United States dollar loses its purchasing power not by 10%, but by magnitudes we cannot even calculate yet. Welcome to the day the world ran out of everything. To understand the magnitude of this event, we have to bypass the political rhetoric and look strictly at the raw data. China accounts for nearly 30% of global manufacturing output. That is a number so large it is hard to visualize. So let me put it this way. If you take the industrial might of Germany, the innovation of the United States, the precision of Japan, and the output of South Korea, and you combine their entire manufacturing power, China still produces more. But the volume is not the scary part. The scary part is the complexity. Over the last 40 years, the global economy has optimized itself for one thing: efficiency. We sacrificed resilience for speed. We built a system called just-in-time manufacturing. Companies do not keep warehouses full of spare parts anymore because inventory costs money. Storing things is expensive. So instead, they rely on a steady, rhythmic heartbeat of container ships arriving from Shanghai and Shenzhen, bringing exactly what is needed, exactly when it is needed. If China disappears, that heartbeat stops instantly, and cardiac arrest for the global economy follows within minutes. This is not a recession. This is an amputation. The scary truth is that we have forgotten how to make things. We have outsourced not just the labor, but the machinery, the tooling, the molds, and the raw material processing that makes production possible. You cannot just flip a switch and start making iPhones in Texas or antibiotics in France. Those supply chains took decades to build. And in this scenario, we do not have decades. We have days before the food runs out, weeks before the medicine is gone, and months before the entire financial system grinds to a complete and total halt. Let us move the clock forward to the first 24 hours after the disappearance. The immediate impact is not felt in the shopping malls, but in the dark, cold waters of the oceans. At this very second, there are thousands of massive container ships navigating the Pacific and Indian Oceans. They are the blood cells of the global economy, carrying everything from microchips to furniture. The moment China goes dark, the global logistics network freezes. The ports of Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Ningbo Zhoushan, which together handle a staggering percentage of the world's cargo, fall silent. The cranes stop moving. The lights go out. The captains of these ships currently at sea are the first to know. Their radios go dead. There are no updates from the port authorities. The satellite tracking systems that monitor millions of containers go offline. Suddenly, billions of dollars of inventory are in limbo. But the real chaos is happening in the control rooms of major logistics companies like Maersk and FedEx. Imagine the scene. Men and women in suits staring at screens that are flashing red. Their entire schedule relies on a continuous loop of ships arriving, unloading, and returning to China to reload. If there is no China to return to, the loop is broken. The ships currently docked in Long Beach or Rotterdam have nowhere to go. They become floating prisons of steel, rusting in the salt water. Meanwhile, the commodity markets open in a state of absolute psychosis. The price of oil is the first to react. You might think oil prices would skyrocket, but initially, they crash. Why? Because China is the world's largest importer of crude oil. Without Chinese factories burning energy and Chinese trucks moving goods, global demand for oil drops off a cliff. Traders panic, dumping oil futures, sending the price of a barrel crashing down to levels we have never seen. But this is a double-edged sword. While oil crashes, the cost of shipping skyrockets. The Baltic Dry Index, which measures the cost of shipping raw materials, goes vertical. It does not just double or triple. It increases by a factor of 10 or 20 overnight. Why? Because every remaining ship that is not bound for China instantly becomes the most valuable asset on the planet. A shipping container that used to cost $2,000 to move now costs $50,000. In the boardrooms of the world's largest corporations, the mood is not panic, it is funeral. Picture Tim Cook at Apple. Picture Elon Musk at Tesla. Picture the CEOs of Walmart and Amazon. They are all looking at the same reports, and the conclusion is identical. They are effectively out of business. It takes less than 24 hours for them to realize that their inventory on hand is all they have left. There are no more shipments coming. Apple runs a famously tight supply chain, holding only a few days of inventory. Once those few days are up, there are no more iPhones. There are no more batteries. There are no more screens. The factories in Vietnam and India that assemble some products, they are useless now. Why? Because they import the components from China. You cannot build a car if you are missing the steering wheel, and you cannot build a phone if you are missing the glass. The interconnectedness of the web is revealed in its destruction. As the sun sets on that first Monday, the average consumer is still mostly unaware of the catastrophe. They might see a confusing headline on the news, but the shelves are still mostly full. The gas stations still have fuel, but the financial markets know. The futures markets for the S&P 500 are locked limit down. Trading is halted before it even begins. The algorithms that run Wall Street have calculated the exposure, and the math says zero. The trillions of dollars of value tied to global trade have evaporated. And as people go to sleep that night, believing that tomorrow will be another normal day, the supply chain bullwhip effect is already snapping towards them at breakneck speed. The world they wake up to on Tuesday will be fundamentally different. It will be a world of scarcity, a world of rationing, and a world where the price of everything is about to be redefined by desperation. Let us step onto the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange on the morning of Tuesday. The opening bell rings, but there is no cheering. There is only a sea of red. To understand why the market is collapsing, we have to look under the hood of the world's most valuable company, Apple. We tend to think of Apple as an American company, designed in California, right? It says so right on the box. But financially and physically, Apple is a symbiotic organism that cannot survive without its host in China. Zhengzhou, often called iPhone City, is not just a factory. It is a fortress that produces the heartbeat of the world's iPhones. But it is not just about final assembly. That is the amateur view. The professional view looks at the subcomponents, the rare earth magnets in the speakers, the processed lithium in the batteries, the specific polished glass for the screens. Even if Apple wanted to move production to India or Vietnam tomorrow, they could not. Why? Because the machines used in Vietnam to assemble phones are made in China. The screws are made in China. The packaging is made in China. The glue is made in China. So, on Tuesday morning, Apple issues a press release suspending all forward guidance. They admit that 90% of their hardware revenue has effectively gone to zero for the foreseeable future. The stock does not just dip. It gaps down by 40 or 50% in a single session. And here is where the contagion spreads. Apple is the largest holding in almost every pension fund, every 401k, and every index fund. When Apple collapses, it drags the entire market down with it. Your retirement savings, half of it vanishes before you can even log in to check your balance. Then we look at Tesla. Elon Musk has built a miracle of engineering, but the Gigafactory in Shanghai is a cornerstone of his production capacity. More importantly, China processes 80% of the world's cobalt and lithium hydroxide. Without these refined chemicals, you cannot build an electric vehicle battery anywhere on Earth. Not in Texas, not in Berlin. Tesla's production lines grind to a halt not because they lack workers, but because they lack the chemical ingredients to store energy. The stock, which is priced based on infinite future growth, suddenly faces a reality of zero growth. By Wednesday afternoon, the panic has moved from the equity markets to the credit markets. Corporate bonds crash. Companies like Walmart and Target, which rely on cheap Chinese goods to fill their shelves, see their credit ratings downgraded to junk status. The banking system freezes. Banks stop lending to each other because they do not know who is solvent and who is about to go under. The Federal Reserve announces an emergency meeting, but for the first time in history, they are powerless. You cannot print shipping containers. You cannot print microchips. Quantitative easing can solve a liquidity crisis, but it cannot solve a physical reality crisis. The trapdoor has opened, and the entire financial architecture of the last 30 years is in freefall. While the billionaires are losing their fortunes on Wall Street, a much more terrifying reality is setting in on Main Street. We need to talk about inflation. But not the inflation you read about in the news, where prices go up by 3 or 4% a year. We are talking about hyperinflation caused by a total supply shock. Basic economics teaches us about supply and demand. Usually, when demand goes up, prices rise slightly. But what happens when demand stays the same, but supply drops to absolute zero? The price does not just rise, it becomes vertical. Let us go back to that toothbrush we mentioned earlier. It is a piece of plastic with nylon bristles. It costs maybe $2 today. But in a world without China, 90% of the plastic molds and bristles disappear. Suddenly, a toothbrush is not a throwaway item. It is
Luxury
a durable
transformation.
asset. People start
Unlocks
hoarding them.
wealth,
The price on
style,
Amazon,
and
if
status.
Amazon is still functioning, jumps to $10, then $50. Why? Because there are no more coming. This is the psychological trigger for hyperinflation. It is not that the currency is worthless yet, it is that the goods are priceless. Think about shoes. While labels might say made in Vietnam, the supply chain starts in China. America relies on Chinese factories for the raw materials of over 70% of its footwear. The glue, the fabric, the synthetic soles, they all come from the mainland. When that flow stops, the factories in Vietnam stop too. When the current inventory at Nike and Foot Locker runs out, that is it. There are no factories in the United States capable of mass-producing sneakers anymore. We bulldozed them 30 years ago to build condos. So, a pair of running shoes becomes a luxury item worth $500 or $1,000. Parents will trade their jewelry to buy shoes for their growing children. This hyperinflation hits the poor and the middle class the hardest. The dollar store model, which supports millions of low-income families, evaporates overnight. There is no such thing as a $1 item anymore. The cheapest item in the store is now $20. We see the emergence of a black market for everyday goods. People start stealing light bulbs from public buildings. Extension cords, phone chargers, batteries, these become the new currency. And then comes the breakdown of repair services. Your car breaks down. You need a new alternator or a simple sensor. The mechanic looks at you and shakes his head. The part is on back order indefinitely because it is made in Guangdong. Your car is now a 2-ton paperweight. This happens to millions of vehicles simultaneously. The used car market explodes, but not for modern cars. For old cars. Cars from the 1980s that do not rely on complex electronics or Chinese-made microchips. Paradoxically, a 40-year-old truck becomes more valuable than a brand new Tesla, simply because the old truck can actually be fixed with American-made steel and ingenuity. The entire value system of society is inverted. We stop valuing innovation and start valuing durability. We stop valuing the digital and start desperately clinging to the physical. If the collapse of Apple and Tesla destroys your portfolio, the collapse of the pharmaceutical supply chain threatens your life. This is the chapter of the simulation that keeps national security experts awake at night. Most people assume that because their medicine bottle says made in the USA or made in Germany, they are safe. This is a dangerous illusion. The dirty secret of the global pharmaceutical industry is something called active pharmaceutical ingredients, or API. Think of API as the flour in the bread. You can bake the bread in a bakery in France, but if the flour comes from a single farm in China, and that farm shuts down, the bakery is useless. China is the world's largest producer of these active ingredients. For some critical drugs, China controls between 80 and 90% of the global supply. Let us simulate the timeline. 2 weeks after the supply chain breaks, hospitals in London, New York, and Toronto start running low on basic antibiotics like penicillin and cephalosporins. These are drugs we take for granted. You get an infection, you take a pill, you get better. But in a world without Chinese API, a simple scratch or a dental infection becomes a death sentence again, just like it was in the 19th century. Then there is heparin. It is a blood thinner used in almost every major surgery to prevent clots. Without it, you cannot perform open heart surgery. You cannot perform kidney dialysis. The primary source of the raw material for heparin is pig intestines from slaughterhouses in China. When that supply line is cut, modern surgery effectively stops. Doctors are forced into a horrific triage situation. They have to decide who gets the remaining stock of blood thinners and antibiotics. It is no longer about who has the best insurance. It is about who has the highest statistical chance of survival. The crisis hits the chronic patients hardest. Diabetics needing insulin, patients with high blood pressure, people with autoimmune diseases, they watch their personal stockpiles dwindle day by day. The black market for medicine explodes. A vial of insulin that used to cost $100 might trade for a gold bar or the deed to a car. We see a resurgence of herbal remedies and unverified treatments because the science-based options are simply physically unavailable. The psychological toll of knowing that the medicine exists somewhere but cannot reach you drives social unrest to a breaking point. Pharmacies are now guarded by armed security or military personnel, not to protect cash, but to protect the remaining bottles of amoxicillin. Leaving the hospital, we walk out into a world that is visually beginning to change. For the last 20 years, we have lived in the era of fast fashion. We are used to buying a t-shirt for $5, wearing it a few times, and throwing it away. That era ends instantly. China is the undisputed king of textiles. It is not just about sewing the clothes, it is about the fabric itself. Polyester, which is found in 60% of all clothing today, is a petroleum-based product, and China dominates the polyester chain. They also process a massive percentage of the world's cotton. When this flow stops, the clothing racks at H&M, Zara, and Uniqlo go bare. Suddenly, the concept of fashion changes. We revert to a mend and repair economy. People stop throwing away clothes with holes in them. Instead, sewing becomes an essential survival skill again. A new pair of jeans becomes a significant investment, costing $300 or $400 equivalent. We start seeing people on the street wearing mismatched, patched, and worn-out clothing. The stigma of wearing old clothes vanishes because everyone is in the same boat. But it goes beyond clothes. Look at the objects in your house. The plastic storage containers, the children's toys, the kitchen gadgets, the tools in your garage. Almost all of the injection-molded plastic goods in the world come from Chinese molds. When these break, they cannot be replaced. We enter an age of intense conservation. If your blender breaks, you do not buy a new one on Amazon. You find a local repairman who might be able to cannibalize parts from another broken blender to fix yours. This creates a massive deflationary shock in the quality of life. Even as prices hyperinflate, we are paying more for less. The consumer society that has defined the West since World War II collapses because consumption requires replenishment. Without the world's factory, there is no replenishment. We become a society of hoarders. You save the plastic bag, you save the glass jar, you save the screw, because you do not know if you will ever see another one again. This shift hits the retail sector with the force of a nuclear bomb. Shopping malls, which were already struggling, become ghost towns. There is nothing to sell. The millions of jobs tied to retail stock clerks, truck drivers, marketing teams vanish because there is no product to move. The unemployment rate skyrockets to 20 or 30%, rivaling the Great Depression. But unlike the 1930s, we do not have the agricultural base to fall back on. We are urbanized, digitalized, and helpless without the complex supply chains that feed and clothe us. The psychological shock of walking into a Walmart and seeing thousands of feet of empty metal shelving is profound. It signals the end of abundance and the beginning of a new, harsher era of scarcity. As the reality of the collapse sets in, the politicians and pundits will scream the same solution: build it here, or move it to Vietnam, or shift to India. It sounds logical on a television screen. But in the boardrooms of logistics companies, this idea is treated as a fantasy. Let us talk about the replacement myth. Many people believe that manufacturing is just a building with machines inside. They think you can just pick up the building and move it to Mexico. But China is not just a collection of factories. It is a biological ecosystem of supply chains that has evolved over 40 years. Take the city of Shenzhen. If you are building a smartphone there and you need a custom screw, there is a factory down the street that makes it. If you need a specific circuit board, there is a supplier 2 blocks away. If you need a prototype molded, it can be done in 3 hours. This is called supply chain clustering. Now, let us look at the alternatives. Vietnam is a fantastic manufacturing hub, but its entire economy is roughly the size of a single Chinese province like Guangxi. It simply does not have the deep water ports, the power grid, or the sheer population to absorb the manufacturing capacity of China. If you tried to move even 10% of Chinese manufacturing to Vietnam tomorrow, the country's infrastructure would collapse under the weight within a week. Then there is India. India has the population, but it lacks the unified infrastructure and the regulatory speed. Moving goods across state lines in India can sometimes be as difficult as moving them across international borders. And the United States? We have a different problem. We have lost the institutional memory of how to build things. We do not have enough tool and die makers. We do not have enough precision welders. We spent 30 years telling our children to become lawyers and app developers. And now we face a shortage of the very people who know how to keep the physical world running. Rebuilding this industrial base in the West is possible, absolutely. But it is not a project of months. It is a project of decades. It would take 10 to 20 years of trillion-dollar investments just to get back to the capacity we lost. And during those 10 years of transition, the world would have to live with a standard of living that looks more like 1950 than 2025. The gap between China disappearing and the world rebuilding is the valley of death for the global economy. So, where does this leave us? We have run the simulation. We have seen the stock market crash, the shelves go empty, the hospitals run out of medicine, and the illusion of independence shatter. If there is one lesson to take away from this terrifying scenario, it is this. Globalization is not a political choice anymore. It is a survival pact. We live in a world where a farmer in Iowa cannot plant his corn without chemicals from Hubei, and a factory worker in Guangdong cannot get paid without a consumer in Chicago buying the final product. We are locked in a mutual embrace. If one goes down, the other goes down. The concept of decoupling, of completely separating the East from the West, is mathematically impossible without accepting a catastrophic collapse in our quality of life. The world without the world's factory is a world that is smaller, darker, and infinitely more expensive. It is a world where the smartphone in your pocket is a luxury for the ultra-rich, where a simple infection can kill you, and where the stability of our society is tested every single day by scarcity. This simulation was not designed to make you love or hate China. It was designed to make you respect the complexity of the machine we have built. We are walking a tightrope over a canyon. We cannot simply cut the safety line because we do not like the person holding the other end. As investors, as citizens, and as consumers, we need to understand that our portfolios, our jobs, and our lives are tethered to shipping containers moving across the Pacific Ocean. The next time you pick up your phone, or brush your teeth, or take an antibiotic, remember the invisible web that made it possible. Because as we have just seen, that web is the only thing holding the modern world together. Thank you for watching this deep dive simulation on FinGraphy. If this scenario opened your eyes to the fragility of our economy, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have more simulations coming that will challenge everything you think you know about money. Until next time, stay curious and more importantly, stay prepared.